Welcome back. In this series of videos, we will be discussing chapter 4 in first PUC biology, that is animal kingdom. In the previous sessions, we have discussed about kingdom Monera, Protista, fungi, and we have studied plant kingdom in detail. The fifth kingdom, according to Robert Whittaker's system of classification, is animal kingdom, which is predominantly characterized by organisms which are multicellular. These are of course eukaryotic and they do not have a cell wall. Plants, fungus, even some protistans and Monera bacteria, they have cell wall even. But animals, they do not have a cell wall. That is what makes them different from all the other organisms. Also, animals are heterotrophic. They depend on other organisms for their food. They exhibit different modes of heterotrophic nutrition. They could be parasites, they could be symbiotic. They also exhibit holozoic mode of nutrition, etc. So that is about the general properties of animal kingdom. If you look around us, we find a vast majority of different types of animals. So the biodiversity of the animal kingdom is vast. Literally there are millions of animals. So under such a scenario, it becomes very important to classify the animal kingdom based on certain general features. Even though there are different types of animals, all these animals, they have certain common thread. They exhibit certain basic patterns in their body structure, and that is how animals are classified based on these basic body patterns. Let us now discuss the basis for classification of animals. So what are these body patterns that are exhibited in most of the animals? Firstly, let us look at point number 1, that is body organization. Body organization, as you know, animals are all multicellular. They are made up of more than one cell. But some animals, they exhibit a loose cell structure. That is, cells are loosely arranged. They do not come together. So we see a cellular level of organization. Example, in sponges, cells are loosely arranged. They are not compact. Whereas in certain other animals, they display a tissue level of organization where certain groups of cells may be similar or dissimilar. They come together and they perform a similar function. So this helps in division of labor, and such a type of body organization is called tissue level of organization. We see them in Hydra, that is in Coelenterata, and also in Ctenophora. So there is a division of labor. In some other organisms, such as the flatworms, which are also animals, they display a organ level of organization where tissues come together and there are some basic organs which will help them to carry out different functions. And in certain other animals, they display the highest level of body organization, that is organ systems. So we see this in earthworm, cockroach, human beings, etc. There is organ system level of body organization where different organ systems, different organs, that is the digestive system, the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the excretory system, all they work hand in glove so that the metabolic activities of the organism is smooth, simple and done in an efficient manner. That is what is called as the organ system level of organization, where different organs they combine and perform the task. So animals can be classified on this basis. If they have a cellular level of organization, or whether they have a tissue, organ or organ system level of classification. Next basis for classification of organism is symmetry. What type of symmetry is exhibited by an animal? Symmetry refers to identical halves. So if you take a square and if you were to pass a imaginary plane of axis or line of axis, you can see that it will divide this square into two halves, two portions. Now that is its symmetry, similar halves. So can you also divide the animals based on their symmetry? So if you look at the animals in general, they exhibit three levels of symmetry. That is, some animals are asymmetrical. For example, once again, sponges. So let us say you have a sponge body, something like this. It is attached to some rock, etc. Now, any plane of axis cannot divide this into equal halves. So we cannot divide it into equal halves. So any plane of axis. So such kind of animals are known to have asymmetrical structure. So there is no symmetry, that is in sponges. The second type of symmetry is called as radial symmetry. Radial symmetry is when any plane of axis can divide the animal into equal halves. So for example, the best is a sphere or a cylinder. So this plane of axis will divide it into two equal halves. Even this plane of axis can divide it this. So any plane of axis can divide the organism into equal halves. That symmetry is called as radial symmetry. So there is more than one plane which can divide it. Example, in Hydra, again Coelenterata, phylum Coelenterata, and also in Ctenophora we have radial symmetry, and in Echinodermata. In these three phylums we see organisms, or during their larval stages they exhibit radial symmetry. The third type of symmetry is what is most commonly seen, that is bilateral symmetry. In bilateral symmetry there is only one plane of axis that can divide the body into two equal halves. So all the animals that is from flatworm onwards. So from Platyhelminthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, human beings, all of them have bilateral symmetry. For example, an imaginary plane of axis passing through the vertical axis can divide us into two equal halves. That is bilateral symmetry. So based on this, as you can see, sponges, that is phylum Porifera, are asymmetrical, whereas we can divide Coelenterata, Ctenophora and Echinodermata into animals having radial symmetry. Rest of the animals, Platyhelminthes, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, etc., into animals having bilateral symmetry. So that is the second basis for classification. We can also classify the organisms based on the presence or absence of coelom. Coelom is a body cavity which can be seen between the body wall and the gut. As you can see in the diagram very clearly, and this coelom is lined by mesoderm. So that is what is called as a body cavity or a coelom present between the body wall and the gut, which is lined by the mesoderm. Now, some animals have coelom, some do not have coelom, and some exhibit a false coelom. So, in animals where the body cavity is absent, they are called as Acylomates. As you can see in the diagram, between the ectoderm and the endoderm, body cavity is completely absent. The white colored region is absent. So example for Acylomates are phylum Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora, Platyhelminthes. Whereas in Acylomates, the organisms, they exhibit a false coelom or a pseudo coelom in phylum Acylomates or Nematoda, wherein you can see in the diagram the coelom is broken into several pouch-like structures which are scattered between the ectoderm and endoderm. So whenever we find these pouch-like structures, this is what is called as pseudo-coelom present in phylum Acylomates or Nematoda. Other than this, all the other animals, they exhibit a true coelom, as you can see in the diagram, wherein the body cavity is lined on the outside by a mesoderm. So we can say that coelom is mesodermal in origin. So that way we can classify the animals based on their coelom: Acylomates, pseudocoelomates and coelomates. The next criteria for classification of animals is the number of germ layers. Now, to understand germ layers, you have to quickly recollect the process of sexual reproduction in animals. During sexual reproduction, we know that, let us say in the case of human beings, the male gamete, that is the sperm, it will come and it will fertilize the egg. Fertilization will take place. On fertilization of the egg, we get a single celled zygote. So egg is now converted into a zygote, which is diploid. It contains the full set of chromosomes. This zygote, over the next few days, it will divide into a bundle of cells. So it continuously divides and finally it produces a mass of cells containing 16 cells and 32 cells. So one single zygote divides to produce a mass of undifferentiated cells. So they are not differentiated. During the 32 cell stage, the cells will now undergo differentiation. They are arranged. The 32 cells will arrange themselves as a outer layer called as the trophoblast, and the remaining cells will form what is called as the inner cell mass. So that is what is called as differentiation. This structure is called as blastocyst, and the cells are called as blastomeres. The trophoblast is the protective outer covering. The new baby or the embryo that is going to develop, the new organism, will develop from the inner cell mass, right? So during development, some group of animals, the inner cell of mass, it will develop, and these will contain only two layers. These are called as the germinal layers. So animals that have two germ layers in their embryonic developmental stage, these are called as diploblastic animals. Diploblast, that is the blastocyst, when it is undergoing development, inside that we find that the embryo has only two germinal layers, diplo. Whereas some other animals, as you can see in the diagram, they have three layers. An outer layer, there is an inner layer, and in between there is another layer also. So such animals which have three germ layers are called as triploblastic animals. So what are these layers? In the diploblastic animals, the outer layer is called as ectoderm and the inner layer is called as endoderm. Only two layers, diploblastic animals. Whereas in triploblastic animals, in between the ectoderm and endoderm, there is a third layer which is called as mesoderm. This mesoderm is responsible for the formation of muscles, all the internal organs, the notochord, etc. all are mesodermal in origin. The coelom is mesoderm in origin. So animals having two germ layers are called as diploblastic animals, whereas animals that have ectoderm, mesoderm and endoderm are called as triploblastic animals. Phylum Porifera, Coelenterata and Ctenophora, these are diploblastic, they have only two germ layers, whereas Platyhelminthes onwards we find that all of them have three layers, so they are triploblastic. So based on this also we can classify the animals, and as you can see, if you look at the number of germ layers and the formation of coelom, in the case of Porifera, Coelenterata and Ctenophora, these have only two layers. Of course, they are Acylomates. In the case of Platyhelminthes, they have three layers. It is triploblastic, but it is pseudocoelomate. It is not well developed. Coelom is found in the form of pouches. Rest all other animals that have a coelom are all triploblastic, because coelom is found from the mesoderm. So an absence of mesoderm layer means an absence of a true coelom. Moving on, in certain animals we can see body segmentation, that is, the body is externally and internally divided into segments or parts. For example, take a cockroach. We can divide the body of the cockroach into three segments: the head, the thorax and the abdomen. For example, take earthworm. If you observe the body of earthworm, externally we can see clear-cut lines on the body of the earthworm. Internally also the body is segmented. The entire body is divided into 100 to 120 segments, and in each segment there are repetition of organs. So this phenomenon is what is called as metamerism, where the body is divided into distinct segments, each containing organs. That is what is called as metamerism. Organisms like Porifera, Coelenterata, Ctenophora, Mollusca, Echinodermata, they don't have segmentation, whereas Annelida, Arthropoda, as well as Acylomates and other higher animals, they exhibit metamerism, that is body segmentation. Now, as animals advance, especially those animals that have a organ or organ system level of organization, they exhibit advanced forms of digestive, circulatory and reproductive system. So in some animals, the digestive system, if you see, it could be either incomplete or complete. For example, an incomplete digestive system is one where there is a single opening. It functions both as the mouth as well as the anus. Example, flatworm. So where we can find incomplete digestive system, whereas in the case of an earthworm or a cockroach or in human beings, the digestive system has two openings. One acts as the mouth and one acts as the anus. So that's what is called as a complete digestive system. So we can classify the animals as to ones that have incomplete digestive system and the ones that have complete digestive system. Similarly, with regards to the circulatory system, also certain groups of animals have what is called as open type of circulatory system. Circulatory system is the one that is responsible for transport of the blood mostly, or some other components such as oxygen, transportation of food, water, etc. In animals, blood is the medium through which all these essential components or essential substances are transported from one part of the body to another part of the body. In animals which exhibit a open circulatory system, what happens is the heart pumps the blood, and the blood, it will directly bath the cells, tissues and the organs. So organs, cells and tissues are in direct contact with the respiratory fluid, that is the circulatory fluid, that is the blood. Whereas in closed type of circulatory system, which we find in human beings as an example, blood is carried by specialized closed network of tubes called as blood vessels, such as arteries, veins and capillaries. So blood flows within tubes. That is what is called as a closed circulatory system. So a closed circulatory system is of course more advanced than an open one. A complete digestive system is more advanced than an incomplete digestive system. With regards to reproductory system, almost all the animals are known to undergo sexual reproduction, and most of them, they exhibit what is called as, they are unisexual. That is, there is a separate male and female organism. Whereas we also find bisexual or hermaphroditism in animals. That is, the same organism has both sex organs, both the male as well as the female sex organs. An example for unisexual organism is human beings. There is separate human male, separate human female. Cockroach, there is separate male cockroach and a female cockroach. Whereas in the case of earthworm, it's a best example for bisexual organism or hermaphrodite. The earthworm has got both testis and ovary in the same animal. Similarly, flatworms, there is no separation of sexes in flatworms. So that is about the reproductive system. Animals could be either unisexual or bisexual. Finally, one of the important criteria for classification of the entire animal kingdom is based on the presence of a notochord. A notochord is a rod-like structure that is seen in the dorsal side of organisms, either during embryo stage or throughout their lifetime. When they are small, or it could be even seen entire life cycle, they exhibit this notochord. So it's a rod-like structure that is seen on the dorsal side. So the stomach side or the face side is the ventral side, the stomach side, whereas the back side is what is called as the dorsal. So this is the dorsal side and the front side is the ventral side. So organisms have a rod-like structure called as notochord on the dorsal side. The notochord has a couple of important functions. Number one, the notochord, the rod-like structure, it separates the nervous system from the muscular system. So all the neurons and nerves can be present inside the hollow notochord, thus separating them from the muscular system. The notochord also acts as a support anchor for the attachment of different muscles. So that is their two functions of notochord. Based on the presence or absence of notochord, the entire animal kingdom is classified into chordata and non-chordata. That is, animals that exhibit a dorsal notochord are called as chordata because they have a notochord. Animals that do not have a notochord are placed under non-chordata. Sometimes the notochord is seen for a brief period of time only during the embryonic stage, and later during development the notochord is lost. So they can be placed under hemichordata. So they exhibit notochord for a very short duration of time. So we can classify the animal kingdom into chordata and non-chordata. Now, on the basis of these 7 points, let us now quickly chart out the different types of animals grouped under different phylums on the basis of this criteria.